Walk down Main Street in Flushing, Queens, and it hits all of your senses at once. Soup dumplings for $6, bubble tea on every single corner, crowds so thick the sidewalk barely moves, all of it packed on top of the busiest subway terminal in the entire borough. It looks like a working-class immigrant neighborhood, loud, cheap, and alive. Now look up, because rising straight out of that chaos are towers of blue glass with apartments that sell for more than $3 million each. Heated indoor pools, private gardens planted with cherry trees, 40 feet above the noodle shops, and the men who built them did not inherit a single dollar. Most of them stepped off a plane from China or Taiwan with a suitcase and almost nothing else. This is Flushing, the biggest Chinatown in the world, and it is quietly becoming one of the most valuable patches of immigrant real estate anywhere on earth. But here is the part nobody tells you. The richest families in this story do not actually live in those towers. They built them, they sold them, and then they vanished 12 miles east onto a stretch of coastline where the mansions of the Great Gatsby still stand. And that is where the real money sleeps tonight. This is Asian Dynasty. From the plumbing supply salesman who built the tallest skyscraper in Queens, to the partners turning a subway stop into an Asian Times Square, to the fortunes now buying up the old Gold Coast estates of Long Island, this is the real story of Flushing's billionaire mansions and the empires hiding right above the dumpling stands. Because to understand Flushing, you have to understand a kind of wealth that builds in concrete instead of marble. It does not throw up a palace with gold gates. It pours a foundation, stacks 60 floors of glass on top, sells every unit, and quietly moves the family to the suburb with the best schools. By the end of this video, you will see exactly who owns Flushing, how they built it out of nothing, and where that money really lives. And the higher we go, the bigger the numbers get. Let us start with the street itself. 40 years ago, Flushing was a completely different world. In 1980, this corner of Queens was about 68% white. Asian residents made up barely 12% of the neighborhood. It was a quiet, aging, middle-class pocket of New York, the kind of place people were starting to leave. Then the immigrants came. First the Taiwanese in the 1970s and 80s, opening shops and restaurants along Main Street. Then mainland Chinese, then Koreans, then others, wave after wave after wave. And they did not just move in, they bought in. Over a single decade, property values in Flushing climbed somewhere between 50 and 100%. By the late 1990s, the commercial strip along Main Street had grown so dense and so busy that it actually overtook Manhattan's own Chinatown in scale. By 2010, the flip was complete. Asian residents now made up more than 66% of Flushing's population. The white share had collapsed to about 20%. Today, more than 30,000 people living here were born in mainland China alone, which makes Flushing, by that measure, the largest Chinatown in the entire world. Bigger than the one in Manhattan, bigger than anything outside of Asia itself. People started calling it the Chinese Manhattan. And here is what really drove it. It was not just jobs. It was schools. And it was land. For a family arriving from Asia, a few hundred square feet of Flushing was not an apartment. It was a foothold in America, a place to run a business, and a path into one of the most competitive school systems in the country. When you pack that much ambition onto that little land, prices do not rise. They explode, and a fortune sits there, waiting to be built. The only question was who would build it. To answer that, you have to meet two men named Michael Lee and Sonny Chu. For more than 20 years, the two partners behind a company called F&T Group have been on a single relentless mission to turn downtown Flushing into what they themselves call an Asian Times Square. Not a neighborhood, a destination, and they have very nearly pulled it off. F&T is now the largest developer in all of downtown Flushing, with close to 5 million square feet of property either already built or moving through the pipeline. Think about that number for a second. 5 million square feet rising out of a neighborhood most New Yorkers still think of as just a place to get cheap dumplings. Their first landmark was Skyview Park, a cluster of luxury condominium towers built directly on top of a shopping mall, looking out over the water. Then came Flushing Commons, a 5-building complex with 1.8 million square feet of offices and homes, built in partnership with the Rockefeller name itself and the developer AECOM. From a subway stop to a Rockefeller partnership. And then came their boldest move of all. They called it Tangram, after the ancient Chinese puzzle, an $800 million megaproject. 1.3 million square feet of shopping mall, hotel, and luxury apartments, built in partnership with a company tied to the Shanghai Construction Group, a state-linked construction giant from China itself. The press said the project would bring Shanghai to Flushing. And inside, it absolutely does. Step into one of the Tangram residences, and the immigrant neighborhood below simply disappears. A heated indoor lap pool, a private interior garden planted with real cherry trees, a high-end Asian food hall, and an arcade downstairs. and the apartments themselves run from around $680,000 on the low end, all the way up to nearly $3.5 million for the very best units. Down the street, at the towers of Skyview Park, it is the same story. A 4-bedroom condo there recently listed for $2,188,888. Now look closely at that number. All of those 8s are not an accident. In Chinese culture, 8 is the number of prosperity and wealth, and brokers here price these homes down to the lucky digit on purpose because they know exactly who is buying. This is luxury built by Asian developers, priced for Asian buyers, stacked 40 stories above one of the densest immigrant neighborhoods in America. It really is next level. And the man who took that idea, the highest of all, started his career selling pipes. His name is Chris Jiaxu. He was born in Yangzhou, China in 1967, and he came to the United States at just 18 years old, with no money and no connections. He did not start in real estate, he started in plumbing. By the age of 24, he owned a plumbing and heating supply business in Queens, selling pipes, valves, and fittings to contractors. And then he noticed something. He was paying rent on the building his plumbing business sat in, so he bought the building. And standing there, holding the deed to a piece of Queens real estate, Chris Xu understood the thing that would make him one of the most powerful developers in New York. The real money was never in the pipes, it was in the land underneath them. In 1996, he went all in, founding what became United Construction and Development Group. And he did not build small. His signature project, Skyline Tower, rises 67 stories over Long Island City, 802 apartments stacked straight into the sky. For a time, it was the single tallest completed building in the entire borough of Queens, and the tallest anywhere in New York State outside of Manhattan. A man who arrived here at 18 with nothing, who started by selling plumbing parts, built the tallest tower in the borough. And he did not stop there. In just the first half of a single year, Xu spent more than $170 million buying up 2 more Queens properties, one of them a Flushing megasite for $103 million in one deal. Years later, he is still at it, snapping up more Flushing land, filing plans for hundreds of new apartments across the borough. And yet, he almost never gives an interview. You will not find him on a magazine cover. He just keeps quietly buying the ground under Queens, one block at a time. That is the Flushing model in one man. Invisible, relentless, and enormous. We are now halfway up this story, and here is where it takes its strangest turn. So before we go on, ask yourself one question and tell me your answer in the comments. With all of those gleaming new towers, who do you think is actually living in them? Because the honest answer is, a lot of the time, nobody. A large share of these condos were never really bought as homes at all. They were bought as vaults, a safe, stable, dollar-denominated place to park money from overseas, far from the reach of Beijing. Bought quietly through companies with the lights rarely ever on. The apartment was not a place to live. It was a bank account with a view. And that tells you something crucial. A lot of this was not wealth being spent. It was wealth being stored. And money that is only being stored can get up and leave the moment the wind changes. So where do the families with real, lasting money actually go? They go east. About 12 miles from the noise of Main Street lies the North Shore of Long Island, the legendary Gold Coast. This is the belt of grand waterfront estates that F. Scott Fitzgerald used as the setting for The Great Gatsby. The real town of Sands Point was his model for East Egg, the home of old American aristocracy, of inherited mansions and private docks. And today, that old money coastline is being quietly bought up by new Asian wealth. In the town of Great Neck, the Asian population more than doubled in under 2 decades, jumping from about 7% of the town to 18%, overwhelmingly Chinese and Korean families. In just one 2-year stretch, more than 130 homes across Nassau County sold for $3 million or more, and more than a quarter of all those buyers were Chinese. Out there, real estate agents have learned to list the mansions at prices ending in lucky 8s, exactly like they do back in Flushing. The Gatsby estates, the old symbols of American aristocracy, are changing hands to the families who built their fortunes one Flushing tower at a time. That is where the real billionaire mansions in this story actually are, not above the dumpling shops. On the water, behind the hedges, where Gatsby once threw his parties. Step back, and a clear pattern comes into focus. Li, Chu, Xu, the thousands of families who followed them. Almost none of them arrived with money. They arrived with a willingness to work, an obsession with owning the ground beneath their feet, and a kind of patience that most people simply do not have. They did not announce their wealth. They did not build marble palaces with their names carved over the door. They built in glass and concrete and steel. They sold it, and they rolled the money straight into the next block, and the next, and the next. And when they finally pulled some of it out, they did not buy a yacht to be seen on. They bought a quiet house in the best school district they could find, and they put their children on the exact path they had crossed an ocean to reach. That is the engine hiding underneath Flushing. Not loud money, patient money. Money that can look exactly like a plumbing supply shop, right up until the day you look up and realize the same man owns the tallest tower in the borough. So the next time someone tells you that Flushing is just a crowded Chinatown, cheap food, neon signs, packed trains, remember what is actually happening there. One of the largest concentrations of Chinese people anywhere on Earth, outside of China itself, is building a brand new American dynasty in real time, in glass towers priced to the lucky number 8, in Gold Coast mansions that once belonged to Gatsby, built by men whose names you will never once see on the buildings they own. Mansions really are next level, but the people who built them are still the quietest money in all of New York. If this surprised you, you have to see what this exact same kind of quiet wealth looks like out in Silicon Valley, the billionaires of Cupertino who live behind ordinary little front doors. We will put it right on the screen for you. And tell me down in the comments, which city should Asian Dynasty uncover next? This has been Asian Dynasty. Keep watching.